Josh, I watch, I don't know how many hours I spend on YouTube. That thing's a rabbit hole, and my subscription list is like a mile long. But I'm kind of cafeteria style. I pick and choose what I want to watch, what I don't want to watch, except when it comes to a few channels out there. And one of them is Path Less Pedaled. And our guest today is the leader of that YouTube channel. It's Russ. Russ, I've never heard you say your last name on the channel. Is it Roca? Is that how I pronounce your last name?
Yeah, it's Roca. Yeah.
Roca, awesome. Well, you are one of the few YouTubers out there that I will watch every video that comes out. I mean, I think that
I'm honored. There's a lot of YouTube.
Yeah, there is. There's tons of it. But your information, I believe, is that valuable. And additionally, in this world of marginal gains where we really soak up the get low, go fast lifestyle, it's good to get your head up once in a while, right, out of that stuff and say, look, there's a bigger world out there when it comes to cycling. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I rely on you for, that I'm always kind of checking myself going, oh, look, there are other folks out there that ride bikes too, and not just the people that put on skin suits and blast down the race course. Like, there's other ways to look at this thing, and they're marginal gainers too. I mean, Russ is a chain waxer and somebody who pays attention to tire pressure, and Josh has been on his show talking about those topics. So, Russ, it's a roundabout way of saying thanks for joining the Marginal Gains podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoy your podcast a lot, and we had Josh, I don't know, gosh, a couple years ago on our YouTube channel, so it's fun to visit your guys' podcast.
Okay. Yeah, gosh, I mean, that was before the pandemic, right? Like,
right.
Use our timestamp, right? Everything's pre-pandemic or post. But my God, that was years ago. Well, and I was just saying, as in the banter before the show, Russ was the guy that I called when we wanted to do our first YouTube video with a human in it, that wasn't just like hands assembling something. And I had watched so much Path Less Pedaled and was like, oh, Russ, what kind of camera should I buy? What kind of lights do you use? and you were like totally instrumental in the setup of the studio. So everybody who's ever watched any of our YouTube channel, you can thank Russ for marginal gaining, or it was actually probably maximal gaining. Taking us from my iPhone to an actual studio setup. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Now you're a pro. It's funny, Michael. You'd asked what are some of our most popular videos, and actually that interview with Josh is among the top. It was such a fascinating talk. So.
It was fun.
You've grown. You've had some nice growth, Russ. It's not been. You weren't a big splash YouTuber, but you're up to 1,300 videos now in your library, 166,000 subscribers. What do you think is the leading topic then overall? I mean, Josh has got the #1 spot, it looks like. Congrats, Josh. But what's your kind of leading topic on the channel?
In terms of content format, people really like bike reviews and gear reviews. As much as the early DNA was being a travel channel, people just want to know what's the cool stuff. Is it any good, and should they buy it? So in that sense, we're a resource like that. What's funny though, however, our #1 most popular video is about taking the Amtrak train.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we did.
I watched that.
We did a full on. We did a full-on sleeper car tour of the Pacifico Starlight, and it's such a cool time capsule because so much has changed. It used to have an arcade car and a theater, very old worldy, and none of that stuff exists anymore. So, but that's actually our most popular video, is a tour of the Amtrak.
It's pretty interesting. I remember when I first heard of you and found the channel, you had done. I think it was a T-Ratchet, a Ty-Torque, a review of one of our products, and I'm like, oh, this guy reviewed, and I went and watched it, and I remember the very next video that came up was like how to best carry your fishing gear, and I just remember thinking oh man, people take their bikes fishing, you just kind of blew my mind, coming from this super performance-y world, and then you just, like Hottie said, fall in the rabbit hole of oh wow, they're just doing so much fun stuff, you're talking about picnicking on bikes and fishing and traveling, and I find that world so fascinating. So I guess take me through the start of the channel. Were you guys doing this stuff already and thinking, I don't see myself on YouTube anywhere, I don't see people doing the stuff I'm interested in, or what kind of kicked that off for you?
Yeah. Well, Path Less Pedal as an entity started early 2000s as a blog. If you guys remember those, it's like long form Instagram. And then we sold everything, traveled for many years. And then when we finally settled, YouTube was starting to take off, and I was starting to see that it was becoming a viable option. We moved to Missoula in 2017. Laura took a job with Adventure Cycling, which is a nonprofit based about creating cross-country bicycle touring routes. And I had some videos up, but initially I was thinking I could get more like client production work, because that's what we were doing when we were living in Portland. And the job market was like zero here for for that. I mean, it's Montana, right? They're going to work with who they work with. So that's when I really had to dive fully in YouTube. Part of it was forced, there just wasn't like any work for me. And for the first time, we had a little bit more of a stable income because Laura was working at ACA. And that just gave me a lot of time to delve in, figure out our voice, which, like you said, is like this alternative, bizarro world to cycling than a lot of people think of. But it's there. I mean, and it's like, people are like you said, one of my reasons for making the videos that I make is, this is stuff I'm interested in that I'm not going to see on Velo News or Bike Radar or Bike Rumor or any other kind of major bike media site. But I know that there's people that are interested in the same things and want the information presented in a certain way. And yeah, I just started making content, or started making the content that I wanted to see.
Mm-hmm. And it comes across that way too. I mean, I see other YouTubers who know how to get hits. Like there's a guy I follow, Rick Beato, Everything Music. He's terrific. He's a teacher and he shares knowledge a lot like you do, but he also knows how to draw in the audience. He has something called What Makes a Song Great, right? And he knows that's going to draw in the audience. He has his top 10 list where he breaks down the top 10 pop songs and what's going on with them, what's wrong with them, what's right with them. That brings an audience, right? And then he talks about the things. But what I see on Path Less Pedal is purely Russ stuff. Like if these are things that you're interested in and you think deserve a wider audience, and that's what's so cool about the site. Like I feel like I'm getting something I otherwise don't get when I'm just scrolling through my daily feed, and I love that about your channel. Russ, describe for us what kind of cyclist you've been and you currently are. I mean, I know you've done some racing, at least one race, which was Unbound, but what kind of cyclist are you?
Probably the best adjective would be normcore. I mean, I think I got into cycling in a very different path than maybe a lot of your listeners. Yeah, I was living in Long Beach, California at the time. I was telecommuting. My truck broke down. This was a time when I was smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And, something turned on. It's like, oh, I should get healthy. So I started walking, taking the bus. Very inefficient. So then I borrowed a neighbor's bike, and that's how I got into cycling. So it was always from a very utilitarian perspective. And Long Beach was a great place to get into biking because there's a big bike path. There's lots of secondary, third streets. And I felt like I was somehow gaming the system, like still getting around, but using a network that wasn't necessarily made for me. And so initially I was a bike commuter. And from then, met some people that started touring. And if you think about bike touring, it's kind of like a really long bike commute from one destination to another. So that's, the bike touring was a big part of our identity for a long time. And we traveled for about 3 years. And then when we finally settled, started to get more into just, recreational riding, like, people ride bikes without carrying stuff. It was news to me. And it actually took me, it's funny. There's some things that people take for granted, but I didn't really start watching any of the grand tours or following pro cycling until almost 10 years after I'd started riding a bike. So, I kind of learned that like as an older adult and developed an appreciation for it. We got into gravel riding, and, we did Unbound in 2016. That was probably like the biggest event that we'd done. And it was, our second gravel event. And it was a big ride, like we'd actually, we signed up for the 200, didn't finish it. We were trying to dropped down to the 100, but we missed the cutoff. We did ride like I think 104 miles of it. So there's that.
Yeah.
But now it's, I think I'm more of just a practical cyclist. I think, we tend to kind of gravitate towards the extremes of sports and lose sight of, just the everyday, making it more accessible. So that's kind of what my focus is on. Even though we've done long distance touring, it's like how to do shorter trips, how to, make every ride feel adventurous, even though it isn't, a bajillion miles or something.
I think that's a great point you bring up, right? The extremes. I mean, we fall into that trap so often on this show, right? Where you just get into like the nuance of the nuance of the nuance, and there's people completely flipping out about that, and sometimes it is like, just go ride your bike. We had a customer this week. I mean, kind of funny. I know as you've fallen into chain waxing, and he's got like a sous vide thermometer in the wax, and he's like, you said it would melt at 160 or 150, and it's at 150, and it's not fully melted. I'm like, well, then heat it a little bit more. But it's one of those things. Like, I think we get so hung up in the detail. Like, like some of those things are critical. If it says torque to 4 Newton meters, you might break it at 5, and people get really hung up on that. And there's just such beauty in like stepping back and being like, just ride. Like you don't have to have anywhere to go. You don't have to be training. I love how you're like, you don't have to have a computer, right? Like, you don't have to be wearing like certain clothes. Just do it. And there's such a beauty in that, right? It does take us back to like the feeling of being like little kids riding bikes, or I don't know. I started commuting within the last few months, and I mean, it's I think some of the most enjoyable riding I do anymore, and I've got my commuter bike with panniers and that, and I can wear my long pants because I've got a chain guard and all that stuff, and you just roll into work, and it's so much better than driving. And I really look to tips and tricks and things from your channel that really helped center me, maybe is the best way to say that, though.
Yeah.
So
I think one thing that gets lost is because I have appreciation for all the science that you guys put up on your website, and I totally understand the benefits of marginal gains depending on what kind of cycling you're doing. So it's not like people get the perception that I'm anti-racing or don't like that stuff. I totally nerd out on the science and can appreciate it, but at the same time, I also know it's not applicable to me. And I think that's the nuance that's missing. You can like and appreciate something and not necessarily apply it to yourself. It doesn't have to be such a, kind of binary either or situation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's a great point.
And by the way, Josh, chain guards can be arrow. So
yes, right.
You're not missing a thing there, buddy, going to work. You're saving a little fraction of a watt there. Russ, tell us, I know you've been paring down your quiver, but give us an idea what it looks like.
At peak bike, we were probably 14 bikes. Now I've whittled it down to 2, and one of them is it's a Sklar Super something, so it's kind of my modern bike. Yep. It's a gravel bike, 650B, mechanical disc brakes, all steel, and then the other bike is just a bike that speaks to my soul. It's not, and it's a Rivendell Sam Hilborn. So very nice. Opposite ends, but you can appreciate both. I feel like I was joking with Laura the other day that the Riv is the bike. The Riv is the bike that I feel like who I am on the inside, and to some extent, the Sklar is a bike that the internet needs me to be or wants me to be. But I like both. There's not there's a little bit of overlap, but not too much. Yeah,
and I saw Laura's Cutthroat, I think, is gone now, and that was the bike both of you, I think, rode those at Unbound, and she's down to the Breadwinner. This is how well I know his channel, folks. I know what bikes they ride. She's on a Breadwinner B-Road, beautiful bike, custom bike.
Yeah, she's far more the minimalist than I am. Like, she'd be content to ride the Breadwinner, as her one and only bike.
All right.
But yeah, I literally sold the Cutthroat. We put up on Instagram, and someone bought it within 5 minutes. So that's good.
Wow. It's interesting you brought up tire wheel choice. You know, I've been thinking a lot, especially since WTB and Moots announced that 750D wheel about, and we had this discussion on an Ask Josh Anything episode, the last one, in fact, about wheel size and what's the sweet spot and where's the industry going with this stuff. You fall in that 650 camp, the 27.5 camp. I know you've been a big advocate of that wheel size for a long time. Where do you think this is the industry finally going to land at a spot that we're all going to agree on? Where would you like to see it go? Bigger, smaller, 700? Where are we going with this?
You know, I think proportional wheel sizing makes sense. I think the proportionality in general is like a big trend that we're seeing. Like people are rethinking crank length. Like, you know, it doesn't make sense that a small bike comes, you know, ships with a 175, you know, whatever millimeter crank. Can I tell you my tinfoil hat theory?
Okay.
I have a suspicion that a lot of the bike designers behind all the brands are really tall. And that's why 700 stuck around and, you know, entertaining the 700D, and 650B seems to have had its moment, but it's passed. But, you know, you kind of design what fits your body. I'd be curious to take a survey at the next Sea Otter and ask them, you know, just get a sense of the average size of the average height of the bike designers for all the big brands.
Josh, insights?
I'm going to say, you know, with having some like design ergonomic study in my background, I don't even think it's that they have to be tall. I think it's, you know, every bike designer in this industry, not every, but 99% of them are like 5'11" white guys like myself. And I think that, and we see this, I know, in automotive engineering and aircraft as well, that, you know, there's such embedded bias towards, you know, average men, but then also tall men. And I think, you know, you tend to, you know, assuming it's like a bell curve of heights, it's like median and up. It gets way more attention than below, you know, you go more than one standard deviation below that median. And I think, you know, short people and women have been screwed forever. Because they're just getting so little attention. And I think, you know, automotive seating positions and ergonomics and all of that stuff really speak to that, right? I mean, it's, you know, you see somebody who's 5 foot tall driving a car, and just everything about it looks completely wrong because, you know, they're like, oh, you know, like the very end of the process, like, oh, yeah, and then you got to make the seat go far enough up for that person.
Right.
So I think it's not totally tinfoil hat. I think you're probably pretty spot on. Yeah, and then because you get into things like toe overlap, right, with small bikes. I mean, just what a nightmare that becomes, and yet we just keep doing it. I mean, it never, you know, it was a problem when I came into the sport 30 years ago, and oh, looky there today. If you're on a 48, it's still a problem. So no, I think you're not crazy at all.
It's good. I am going to take a survey of next time we go to Sea Otter of what brands are there. If they'll answer that question, I'd be curious.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing you've been chasing, Russ, that I love too is gearing and gear ratios, and kind of gear ratios for the rest of us, not the race types, right? And while we had a discussion, in fact, last show about one by kind of finally having its day on the race side of things, on the performance side of things, Russ, you have been making, I think, a valid argument that the 2x is still valid, the 2x is not dead, and the 2x should be strongly considered for anybody who has to carry weight, for anybody who's not in the go fast community, who has to go uphill a lot. You've been going a long way towards finding a way to put front derailleurs back in business. I mean, this is do you think this is the answer to going uphill, to carrying stuff, and that is set your bike up 2x?
I mean, I think it is for me. Like, what's interesting is, like, historically, you know, if you look at 3x, we've lost more range than we've gained, right? Like a 90s mountain bike had, you know, 620% gear range. Whereas, you know, you get SRAM Eagle, it's touting 540%. So we lost a whole 100%. But somehow, you know, but when you frame it as 540%, but not within the spectrum of what we used to have, then it sounds great. But when you look at, you know, historically, you know, there were lower gears a long time ago, and they fell out of fashion. You know, the technology stopped supporting them. But I think they're totally valid. Like when we rode across the country, you know, this is pre-bike packing. So the ultimate in terms of bike travel was like the four pannier and the saddlebag, like the German tourist, right? And I was traveling with a light stand and full-on studio gear because I had this very romantic notion that, you know, we were going to travel, we were going to go to towns. I'm going to talk a restaurateur into letting me shoot some food photography because I did a lot of that, or portrait stuff. So our bikes weighed 300 pounds. And we had to go up and over mountain passes, dirt roads, whatever. And there was no way that would have been possible with a 1x. You know, we had a 3x back then. So I definitely, and that was our early days when we were cycling. So I have a very strong like bias towards having low gears. So I think it totally makes sense. And I feel like there's a little bit of a shift. You know, at first, like the putting mullet gearing on the drop bar bike was, you know, so race, you know, it was like so radical. Now it's almost like, you know, de facto standard. But yeah, I think 2x is still a totally viable option beyond just the granularity of the gearing. I mean, it's the best way to get range. And I'm a big advocate of like the wide range 2x where there's even less like overlap. And it's basically like having, you know, jokingly 2 1x's, but very distinct ranges. Like the Sklar I have, it's 40-24 in the front and 11-40 in the rear. So if I just stay in the big ring, it's essentially the gearing that most 1x's have. But once, you know, the grades, you know, upper teens, low 20s, carrying stuff, I drop it into that 24 and have like, you know, can spin up anything. Yeah.
So, well, are there enough rear derailleurs that can handle that wider range? I think that's the question, right? If you have a 40-24 up front and then a big cassette out back, boy, that's a lot of chain there.
Yeah, the GRX 812, the 2x. I think they, you know, Shimano just, you know, understates its actual capacity. That's an awesome derailleur. And it does it like a champ. So I'm super stoked on it.
I have to say I love how many things you do on the show that have some element of like, they say you can't do this, but we're going to try it. Because I think that speaks to the, you know, the hacker in all of us. I love the way you hack things, and you and I both share. We might be the only two left, but this romantic love for friction,
right?
Shifting, right? Where, you know, like on one hand, like it's objectively terrible, but it's also like subjectively pretty awesome. And and I mean, I own more friction bikes than I do index bikes, but I love that element of. You know, you're hacking, but not at that weird performance end of, you know, how to go faster, but like how to make this thing more functional, or how to make it work, or how to, you know, Shimano says don't do this, but let's see if it will.
It's probably a good reason why we're unsponsorable.
Well, you've made some friction product there for us, Russ. You're in addition to being a YouTuber, you're a product engineer, I should say, right? And you have a bar and shifter out. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a bar and shifter made by Diacomp. You know, Jim from Mary's Sales, who's been a long-time importer of lots of Japanese products, reached out and said, you know, are there any products that you wish existed? And I gave him like a list of 5. And one of them was for a bar and shifter that would work with modern rear derailleurs, because since, you know, 11 speed, it requires more cable pull, and, you know, your typical bar and shifter won't pull enough. There is micro shift that does it, but there's no ratchet, so it feels kind of dead inside when you shift. So I wanted something silver, something that had enough cable pull and also had a ratchet, because it feels good. It holds the tension a little bit better. And they modified like a pre-existing shifter pod and machined some new parts so it works on the bar end. In the works, they're going to do a Gevinel style version of it, so it's off of the Brifter, or similar to a Brifter, And yeah, so yeah, slowly getting into very niche product development.
Well, Rivendell, I think what you're saying is that ratcheting thing is nice, especially with all the clutch derailleurs we have. It will better hold things into gear. That's where the ratcheting is a plus, right?
Yeah.
What are the other 4 things you wrote down?
You know, another one in our alternative universe of cycling is alt bars. So some kind of flat bar, but with nubbins that you can position for, you know, when you want to hide from the wind or what have you. And the problem with that is there are some bars with those nubbins baked in, but it doesn't suit everybody. You could take a mountain bike bar end and put it on there, but you have to remove all your controls in order to do it. So one of the things that I wanted was like a mountain bike bar end with a hinged clamp, so you can just take it on and off as you please. So we're developing one which does that. But what's interesting is that the part that sticks out actually has an expander plug, so you can put on different modular bar ends. So if you wanted it a little bit shorter or angled a different way, you know, there's potential for setting it up and making it work best for a variety of bars. So that was one. What else was there? A silver 27.2 dropper post.
Okay.
With offset, and they found the manufacturer, and it's going to be interesting because it's going to be a spring coil, not hydraulic, so supposedly a little bit more robust, and it's going to have a crotch lever, so it's essentially a modern height right. So a lot easier to move from bike to bike to bike. You don't have to deal with routing and everything. So, yeah. And I forget the other one.
It's okay.
That's fun. I think we just talked about height right in the last show that we did.
Okay.
What a throwback, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I've talked about height right in 20 years, and it's come up twice in a week. Not the good old days on that product, I have to say.
Yeah.
But I love that you love the bar ends. I was a big bar end guy, and modern mountain bikes, you get on like, why are the bars 7 feet wide, and why are there no bar ends? Like,
right.
Like, do you not have trees where you ride, and do you not want a out of the saddle climbing position? And apparently the answer is that no, nobody but me and you apparently want that. But craziness. Talk to me about mechanical. I love the mechanical dropper post. You are a big cable pull disc brake guy as well, which there are few. There are very few of you, but you have your reasons. So talk us through that, because I think that's a fascinating.
You know, first off, not all mechanical disc brakes are created equal. I feel like a lot of people have bad experiences with the cheaper ones, and then, you know, kind of blow off all the other ones. There's some really good ones like the Pauls, but also the Grotech mechanical discs. Those things are like crazy strong for what they are. I like it mostly because of the simplicity. You know, I had an instance where, so much of my channel is informed from, you know, our experiences on tour. I burnt my hand while we were biking across the country, and I had to quickly change my right brake to my left brake at a campsite. And there's no way I could have done that with hydraulic in the field, you know. So I was able to do it with cable, and it was actually really simple. So, you know, things like field repairability. You know, I've had, you know, hydraulic brakes just, you know, go bad, like they lose the pressure no matter how, and, you know, like I have to take it down to the shop because I don't, you know, have the tools to work with it. So for me, it just feels more transparent. You know, I got into bikes because at the time I was working as a designer and always on the computer. So for me, it was an analog escape, and I want to keep it as simple as possible. So anything that adds black boxes or things that I can't see and understand or intuitively, I tend to shy away from. And it's not to say that, you know, everyone should do the same. Also, my riding style, which, like I said, is normcore. I'm rarely pushing the products to their breaking point. So, you know, it'd be a different conversation if, you know, I was a downhill mountain biker. But for the riding, I know that mechanical disc brakes have enough stopping power. They're easy to understand for me. I can change them to my heart's delight without having to take them to the shop or watching too many YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my most recent build, I decided, okay, this thing's going out the door with mechanical disc. And I'll have to say, I mean, my mind just went instantly at ease, right? I'm like, oh, thank God, no bubbles in the line. I mean, I had this one incident, Russ, where I was out getting ready for a mountain bike race or reconning the course. I crashed and I kicked the brake line, hydraulic brake line, down at the caliper as I crashed. That loosened it right at the caliper, and fluid came out.
Oh, no.
This is the day before the race. Now, thankfully, there was a shop in town who knew Hope Brakes, and he was able to bleed and get things running for me. But had I been, you know, camping or on my own somewhere, boom, I'm done. I don't have a bleed kit with me, right? So, and so some of those types of incidents will have you, I think, thinking twice about some of these technologies that a lot of us go, yeah, for performance, they work great. Absolutely. Downhill mountain biker, you're going to need hydros. But are they necessary all the time? No, not all the time. You will have to adjust your mechanical brakes. That's on you, right? Hydraulic kind of takes it. But the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Hey, you went to the Made Bike Show this year. That was kind of the NABS replacement show there in Oregon. And I think you came away with a couple interesting videos and takeaways. And that was this theme, that is the road bike is making a comeback, question mark? Is that really the case? Are we really done with gravel? And is road going to come back around to us?
I think like a modified version of road. Like talking to Tony from Breadwinner, he said that there was a little bit of a dip in interest in something like the G Road, and a little bit more interest in a fat tired road bike. So by fat tired road bike, something that'll take at least a 38 and maybe a fender. And similarly, even talking to Igor from Velo Orange, you know, who does mostly touring and wide tire stuff, there seemed like some interest in just something, you know, light and sporty, not necessarily aggressive from a fit perspective, but a little bit more like tucked and compact, and just a, you know, very playful handling bike, but can still take wider tires.
Did they say why? What are the customers?
Tony, I think Tony posited that, you know, that many of his customers, you know, found themselves riding a lot of road on their gravel bikes, ultimately, or more road than they were anticipating. So you know, it's kind of like just a self-correction. You know, just like anything, you know, when fat tire bikes came out, or you know, fat bikes came out, huge, massive tires, and everything's kind of brought into a little bit more reasonable spec now.
Yep. And number two from the Made Bike Show was aluminum. I was a little surprised. I have been surprised recently to see aluminum kind of make this comeback, because we'd all kind of said, oh, yuck, aluminum, right? Rides like hell. We're all carbon people now, or steel, and aluminum kind of got left out there. Is that material making a return now too?
I think so. I think with the wider tires, you feel the tire more than the material at that point, once you get into, like, you know, 40 millimeter and above, right? So that's also from just like a profit margin perspective, like with the different brands I spoke to, there's just better margin with aluminum bikes. So
yeah, I think a lot of the welding technology, you know, over the last 20 years has changed, and we've got better, you know, high frequency welding, and some of these other things makes it a little bit easier to do quickly. And I think some of the, you know, back when it all started, right? I mean, you had to be 10 years experience to weld thin wall aluminum tubes, and now you can learn it a little bit quicker. I have to say, one of my favorite bikes I ever raced was a DeRosa Merak aluminum frame, and that for me was a real eye opener. Like, oh wow, there's a right way to do this. I mean, that was a beautiful, you know, I think my first ever race bike was a Cannondale, and I think you know, one of the 3.0s with everything's like an inch, you know, tubing, and you think, oh, aluminum rides harsh. Well, it does when it's got you know, the super short wheelbase and everything's twice the diameter it needs to be. And but yeah, I loved reading or seeing your take on that, because I mean, some of the aluminum stuff people are doing is beautiful. It's really just beautifully done.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I think the amazing thing too to see is that small builders are embracing aluminum. Before it was like Rock Lobster, and then who else did aluminum? Not many folks. And it seems like the small builders now paying attention to that material and using it now too. To
yeah, there's you know, Ron and Crust Bikes. You know, they're working with Frank the welder to come up. You know, their second aluminum bike. Who else was there? Sean from he owns a bike shop near Pasadena called It's Not a Bike Shop. They have their own house brand aluminum bike called the Beach Club, or it's part of the Beach Club line. So it's, you know, it's, when I say it's a trend, it's not that like it disappeared. You know, there's clearly lots of mass-produced aluminum bikes, but in terms of, you know, our alt cycling world of niche boutique bike brands, it's like, oh yeah, you know, this is a cool alloy alternative for people that don't want to go carbon but want, you know, to cut some weight and maybe, you know, some of the performance aspects of aluminum.
Well, Path Less Pedaled, one of the catchphrases there is Party Pace. I have Party Pace stickers on my bikes. That's how you can support Russ, by the way, who will tell you he's a sticker salesman doing a YouTube channel.
It's true.
So you can get your Party Pace stickers and plaster them all over your race bike and get weird looks from your friends on group rides. It's absolutely the most fun you can have. But that said, you know, Russ himself will dabble in the marginal gains area, as he said, and he did post a video about this called "Was Chain Waxing Worth the Hassle?" So Russ, tell us about what areas of marginal gains that you've heard about on this show you've incorporated into your builds, your riding, and how have they worked out, and then on a larger scale, how are they kind of viewed and absorbed by your audience?
Probably the biggest thing I've incorporated is the chain waxing, and it's not for any performance gains, like in terms of wattage or what have you. Like, my main interest is, you know, bike parts are expensive. Increasing their longevity is important. I really went in on chain waxing during COVID when the supply chain looked as if like no one was getting any bike parts ever again. It made perfect sense then. I still do it now. In fact, I just waxed our chains right before going to Spain. And, you know, another thing is like cleanliness. We travel a lot with our bikes, and I can, you know, put some clothes in, you know, the bike bag, and I know it's not going to be oily, sticky mess when we unpack. I think for the most part, our audience has been really receptive to it. But again, they confuse, you know, they see something like waxing and some of them think it's something only racers do. Why, you know, Mr. Party Pace, are you dabbling in that? And again, I think it's like people are more nuanced. They don't give themselves or other people more credit. Again, you know, you can appreciate for the performance aspects, but there's a whole slew of other benefits to waxing your chain that someone who doesn't race can appreciate as well.
Yeah, we hear that all the time. I mean, how many people come up to us at events and say, like, I don't care about the watt savings, but the cleanliness, right? Or if you have pets, right?
Right.
we have a rule in the office that we have our little office dog, Rico, and he loves to sleep under bikes. And we're like, if you ride to, you have to have a wax chain if you're going to bring a bike to work, because otherwise he just ends up with like a black stripe down his back. The other, I think, huge overlap, and you know, you coined another phrase and another sticker is the supple life. And I think I love that that's such a, you want to go fast, you need supple tires. Like, you want to have a good time and be comfortable and ride on this terrain, you need supple tires. It's universal.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like, however, taking like the temperature around Maine, that there was that although 650B had its moment, that there was a little bit of retraction, and a lot of gravel bikes are, you know, they're kind of standardizing around 700 by 40. which is fine, but like, you know, again, as like a shorter leg person, it's still nice to have 650B by, you know, 48 and, you know, not deal with toe overlap, not have like a bike that has super high trail that feels all floppy on the front. So
another marginal gain topic.
I think it's a mistake.
Go ahead,
Josh. Personally, I think the 700 by 40 is a mistake. You know, a lot of the testing we do, if you follow like the stuff we did with Dylan Johnson, you know, at these speeds, even at racing speeds, the wider tires are almost always faster on actual gravel. And so I think there's a real argument to be made for, you know, 650 by, you know, 48 or 50 or somewhere in that, you know, the aerodynamics are costing you almost nothing. But the rolling resistance and certainly the comfort and the handling that come along with it, you know, from a performance side are better. But I think for my own riding, I mean, I'm with you. I'm still on 650 by 48s at the moment, and you know, you're not giving anything up, and you're probably gaining at least a marginal something.
Right.
And another topic you had, Josh, on your channel about it, I think as I recall, was tire pressure and how to get that right. Russ, how is that informed your bike setups? Like, are you get particular dialed about that, or do you just pump them and go? Is this improve your rides as you go out and test bikes?
Yeah, definitely. You know, usually when a bike gets sent, if the tires are inflated, they're overinflated. Because I think a lot of people are still the mindset. It's like, you know, if you feel that road buzz, you're going fast. So there's definitely a bit of adjustment. I forget where. I mean, I have a good sense now. I don't have to use a tire gauge all the time, but I have a good sense of like where I like it. It's actually a little bit lower than what the SILCA calculator suggests, but you know, I imagine it's all a range depending on your preference. But yeah.
Yeah, the calculator we always say is the peak minimum of sort of that trough as discovered across all the testing that's been done, and so it's optimized for speed over comfort. But yeah, I run my own tires probably 5 psi below, in the road tires probably 5 psi below what the calculator says, because I don't care if I'm going fast.
As you said, Russ,
so talk to us about. Talk to us about Girona. I had no idea, and it was in Hottie's email to try to set this up. I'm like, wait, what? They're moving to Girona.
Yeah, so we were there last year and stayed a month and just really enjoyed the place. Like Laura did a study abroad in Cordoba many years ago. Post-college, I did a backpacking trip through Spain. So it's a place that we always wanted to return to. And, you know, it wasn't until, you know, after, you know, kind of COVID settled down and Laura got through her cancer treatment that we could travel again. So when we went, you know, it's bananas, right? I think, have you been? It's like there's like 20 bike shops and within 2 blocks, and they're all super high end, and the food's amazing and the scenery is amazing. You can ride to the coast, you can ride up the dirt roads in the Gavaras, you're at the foothill of the Pyrenees. We just had a blast, and we started to do the math to see if it was financially feasible. And we're actually going to be saving money by moving there. And also, like, another thing that kind of lined up is this year's Spain opened up a digital nomad visa, and its requirements were ones that we met. You know, you didn't have to invest $500,000. You didn't have to have, you know, loads of money because you were retired. They wanted to attract, you know, younger working professionals that were drawing most of their income from, you know, out of the country. So that's what we're doing. Yeah, we fly out November 4th. The one tricky thing is the nature of this visa is you can't apply for it until you're actually there. Okay. So there's there's a slight chance, you know, a non-zero chance that, you know, we could get rejected for whatever reason, and then we'd come back and try again. But for all intents and purposes, you know, we're getting rid of everything, trying to move there, and try to reestablish ourselves there with European brands, try to figure out or source the quirky bike culture that's in Spain or, you know, other neighboring countries. I mean, it must exist, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it was an eyebrow-raising moment for your audience when you said you're going to Girona, because at least stateside, we recognize Girona as the place where pros go and train and live, and it's at least on the surface, seems like the Go Fast community. Where does Party Pace fit in there? I mean, I imagine your audience was asking that question. Are you asking that question?
Oh yeah, every day. Yeah, we went and we did a chill social ride with the Black Foxes. They were showing a film over at Eat Sleep Cycle, and there was probably, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 bikes there, and we were the only like non-carbon bikes. So there's definitely that. So I feel like it must exist, or, you know, if it doesn't exist, then maybe we can, you know, put it in the water. We're already trying to come up with a different phrase. I think we're going to go with tempo tranquilo, which is
Nice.
which is a good analog. So there may be new stickers to sell in Spain.
Oh, I like it. I like it. Well, and you'll have Taylor Finney.
Right,
He's into some party pace these days.
He's gotten weird, man. He's got cargo bikes. He's a DJ. He makes art. I mean, if there's anyone that's, you know, that we can get on board. But yeah, so Taylor, we've already communicated a little bit on the gram. We're gonna have him on. You know, and I feel like some bike shops get it, like Eat Sleep Cycle. We'll probably interview them. So I think for the most part, at the surface, it is very road and performance oriented. There's like no doubt, but you know, either there is a kind of alternative cycling culture and it's just never been focused on, or, you know, there's an opportunity to start to develop one, and that's what's really exciting. Is you know, it's basically a blank slate.
Yeah, I think there's a great opportunity too. I mean, the European pro mindset, and, you know, actually, I'll likely be in Girona within the next few months with just team camps, and we have multiple service courses there for teams and things we work with. But so I'll look you up. But you know, the European pro mindset is quite, I think, different from a lot of the American pros. You know, those guys, when they retire, I mean, a lot of them don't get on a bike again. You know, or they go into the hotel business or into the family business or whatever, and there isn't an obvious like path of enjoyment. You know, I think of so many ex-pros that work in the industry but barely ride. And I think it's that, you know, racing or nothing. And so I love that you're bringing that, because I think it's, you know, they certainly are seeing. I mean, we just talked with Nicky Terpstra the other day about, you know, kind of his plans, and like, oh, you know, look at the Americans. You can leave pro racing, you can go do some gravel, you can race a Leadville, and then you can actually like just have fun, and you don't have to even be training. And I think that's a very American mindset. So I love, I have this picture of you like planting these little seeds.
Yeah, I hope so. I was thinking about that. You know, like when we came up with the word party pace and brought it to cycling, it was a means to capture, you know, everything that's non-competitive, which for most people when they ride a bike, that's like a majority of their life. You know, but there's no identity to really wrap yourself around in. You know, so I think in some ways it's sad as a professional cyclist where your value is condensed into such a short time period, and then you're expired. And then what? This thing that you did for a long time that maybe you loved, you know, you don't see your place, you don't see yourself in the industry anymore because you're not at that level, or you've lost so much. So it's, I think, a means to kind of, you know, appreciate cycling or still enjoy cycling, you know, post career, or even if you never get into racing. So,
yeah, in reality, probably enjoy it a lot more.
Right. Yeah, actually,
the racing and training is less than enjoyable, like most of the time.
Yeah, the term came up. you know, do you remember when Everesting came about, the idea of the notion of Everesting? And it was really popular. All these brands were hopping on it. You know, there were all these competitions or like online things promoting it. And, you know, I was like, why are there only cool words for racing or that kind of cycling? We need like our own unique vocabulary, and one that isn't subservient to, you know, racing. It's not like slow riding or the B group or something that's celebratory. And it was a very conscious effort to try to integrate the word party pace to encapsulate that. And what's interesting, you know, like I made a video on it, you know, I wanted to wag the dog a little bit and see if we can, you know, drop it into the bike industry. We've seen events like Nebraska Ungrounded. They use a word, you know, in their promotional material, whether you're racing or party pacing. Shimano has used it in some of their videos. You know, All City. So it's, you know, in terms of like creating a, you know, because I was a literature major, so I understand the importance of language. And it's like, if there isn't a word that kind of encapsulates it, people don't understand it or can't see themselves doing it. So we needed some phrase to just rally around.
Yeah, it's funny, for as big as that university is, the one you talk to on a daily basis, the bike industry has always shaded towards the competitive side to things. Is that narrative, Russ, starting to change? I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. It didn't happen because of COVID. We thought it might. But is the industry starting to at least nudge that way?
I think they understand that it's important to kind of, instead of selling more stuff to the same cyclists, to branch out. But I feel like they're ill-equipped because they're not hiring people with different perspectives. You know, if you hire someone, you know, that was formerly a good bike racer, you know, and you put him in the marketing department, he's going to focus towards that. So I feel like you almost need someone else from the outsider can see it through a different lens. Yeah, there was a Rick Vosper article in Bicycle Retailer, like in the middle of COVID, and he was saying the bike industry has to, you know, address more than the elite cyclists, you know. So there's this moment, but then, you know, it just does what it does, or what it's always done. There's an article in the Cycling Industry News magazine that they put out. It was with someone from the Acel group based in Spain, and the P2 recognized it's like, okay, we have to, you know, talk to more people than just, you know, those that we're already talking to, but he admitted that they didn't know how to reach them.
That's a great. Those are interesting, and I think you've nailed it. I mean, a lot of it is the words. I mean, I think of, as you're talking, I'm thinking about like our brand and how to. What is that? What do you call it? Right? It's,
right.
You know, we say this is for great for commuters, great for touring,
right.
Great for. But we really don't. Party pace is sort of the only phraseology around like fun riding that's none of the other things.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Russ, we know that a big part of your channel has been reviewing bikes. You've seen a lot of machines over your time and probably see a lot more. So give us, if you want to tell us your maybe top 3 of everything you've ridden, and what's kind of the underlying theme, do you believe, of what makes a party pace bike or a supple bike or a bike that rides nice? What's the kind of the common denominator there?
I think I look for bikes that are versatile, that can do many tasks. Yeah, so I value things like utility, bikes that use very common standards. So you have to buy some exotic, you know, seat post or handlebar or stem combination just to make it fit. I also gravitate towards kind of odd bikes. Like I've reviewed over 100 bikes on the channel, and I think like anything, when you do a lot of something and really delve into it, you kind of, you know, you like the novelty of strange things because so many of the bikes fall within the same category or same design elements. One of the bikes that the 3 I would point to is, one is by Will Sharon. He was actually at the Made show, and it was a forward geometry gravel bike. So, short rear end, I think it was like 420, 425. Long front center, head tube angle was something like 66 or 67 degrees. So similar to the Chamois Hagar in some sense, but it was all alloy, and he had a 3D printed fork. And that wouldn't be the only bike in my stable because it does ride a little bit weird, but it's super fun in the right terrain. It's such a blast. Another bike that really bubbled up, was also at Made, was a Super Tramp by Jeff Frayne from Wild Bikes. And it's an ATB. So it's what a mountain bike, if a 90s mountain bike were made today with today's standards, but the 90s mountain bike sensibility, it's that. It's still fairly playful, but super capable, big tires, but not very extreme. It's not designed around a suspension fork, so it's meant to be fully rigid. And for the third one, I don't know. Those are the top two.
Well, not the Sam Hilborn or the.
Oh yeah, well yeah, everyone should totally have the Sam Hilborn.
Okay, all right. Or something from Adam Sklar, who is a terrific builder up in Montana.
Yeah, I like the Rivendell's notion of a country bike, which is very similar to like what the Wild Super Tramp is. It's it's a bike that you can take on trails, but not the most extreme trails. But it's still fairly capable, and if you take it on a gravel ride or a road ride, it's not a complete dog either. So,
So it's perfect for the stuff that most people are actually doing.
Yeah, the normcore bike.
Normcore. Oh man, I think those are going to be our takeaways from the show. We've got the supple life and party pace and now normcore.
Right.
Awesome. Well, Russ, I thank you so much for coming on the show. This has just been such an enjoyable one, and I love breaking the mold of our own show to talk about stuff that in so many ways is a lot more fun.
Yeah.
And different. So thanks once again for joining us. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks for having me.